Okay, everybody, thank you so much for tuning into From the Cowboy State podcast. I am your host, Michaela Getz, and this is episode number 8. We are joined online this time, actually, via Zoom. We've got Dr. Whit Stewart and his still graduate assistant for now, Dylan Laverell. And I am going to go ahead, turn it over to Dr. Whit Stewart first, and then Dylan, and let them introduce themselves.
Well, thanks, Michaela, for having us on the podcast. Really excited to be with you today. So, yeah, you mentioned I'm Whit Stewart. I'm a sheep extension specialist and associate professor here at the University of Wyoming, located here on campus, but with responsibility to be in extension and travel throughout the state, some research, and then teach 2 classes each year, in addition to training great grad students like Dylan. Dylan.
Yeah, well, thank you, Michaela, for having us on today. Like Whit said, my name is Dylan Laverell, and I am just recently defended my master's here at the University of Wyoming. But for the short term on campus, I am teaching the wool evaluation course and am the head coach for the wool judging team on campus and helping and assisting with extension activities throughout the state.
And that's no small feat because we've gotten to work with you quite a bit, Dylan, on the University of Wyoming Sheep Task Force. And you wrangling us is kind of like wrangling cats, I think is fair to say. A little bit.
Dylan would probably say anything you sign up for in the sheep program is a cascade effect. You see the iceberg,
Yeah.
and the next thing you know, the ship is sinking. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dylan wears many hats, and the task force has
He
been
does.
awesome to expand that for sure. And Michaela,
Absolutely. So,
you're a new member to the task force, but how many members are we up to now?
oh gosh, are we at a full dozen or 15?
I think so.
Because between myself, Dan in Washakie County, and then Brenna Latinsky, um, I mean us, or 3 of us that are new.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had, a good handful before, but I think we're at about a dozen, give or take.
Yeah. Well, it's been really cool to have that involvement, and I think these synergies, you guys out in the state are our eyes and ears, and and then also when we deliver that programming, you guys are excellent resources, and this podcast is an example of that. So we look forward to seeing what happens in the year to come. Dylan is going to be the point person here for at least 8 months while I'm gone. So
Yeah, which I do want to talk about you being gone, but just really quick, Dylan and Whit, because again, like you just mentioned, I'm new kind of coming into the Sheep Task Force and everything, and that's actually how I got to meet you, Whit. But did you guys know each other previously before Dylan's graduate assistantship or his courses, what have you? And I ask
Dylan's
because it
had the
seems like you
misfortune of
guys
working with
are
me a long
friends.
time. Dylan, you take that one.
Yeah, so back when Whit was at Montana State, I grew up raising sheep, and I consigned a couple of rams to the Montana State Ram Test in 2015 was when I first had the opportunity to meet Whit. And he tried to convince me that day to become a Bobcat, but we both knew that wasn't going to happen. So thankfully, Whit came down to Laramie, and I, a couple years later, followed him after I graduated high school. So I've been in Laramie since 2018, started with the wool judging team. And I think one of my first helping out with research on campus was that first year we tried to do the on pasture ram test for some of that stuff. So I remember going out there and checking bunks for that. And then later was looking at somatic cell counts and milk with some of Dr. Chad Page's doctoral research. And yeah, just been part of the program ever since.
I gotcha. That makes sense. Well, that's really neat. Okay.
And it's been deliberate, Michaela. I think that's something that's kind of unique about the sheep program here is that if you're passionate about sheep and wool production as an undergrad like Dylan, he was in the lab his first semester. And so you get a pretty robust experience, I think, and it's pretty hands-on. And we've had many great undergraduates and graduate students come through this program, and they're what make it work here on campus. And then it's our colleagues out in extension that make it work out in the state. And then of course our producers that are our true partners. So
Yeah. And not to throw Chance under the bus or anything, Chance Marshall and I, though, were talking about you, Whit, just the other day. And to be fair, I think it's a lot to do with you kind of leading the program, because I think it's fair to say you make us excited about sheep, because I knew nothing about sheep. I mean, again, as you pointed out, I'm new to the Sheep Task Force. That's the first that I've had to dip my toes even in this field. And when we were what were we at? Oh, the RMAL, the Ranching Management Agriculture Leadership Program. And you were asking me, what's your experience? And I was like, none. And, you were like, okay, well, what, like cuts of, sheep or lamb have you had? And I was like, I haven't. I'll be honest, I come from a beef family. And you're like, well, we're going to change this. And then, you were just really excited about it and enthusiastic, and you just know so much about so much. And so it's really easy to get excited about the program and to learn about the wool judging and all the different grades of like the fleece and everything, from you, to be honest, because
well, that's really kind,
not
but
yeah,
I think what's not what's not to like about sheep. I feel like the ability to produce lamb and wool from grass and to do it
yeah,
pretty cost effectively, and for emerging entrepreneurs in agriculture, they have a low capital entry point, and
yeah,
demand for lamb continues to rise. There's a resurgence in interest in wool fiber and all its
there
ecological
is.
benefits, environmental benefits. So I mean, I appreciate you saying that, but it's an awesome species to work with. And then the people that are engaged in the culture of producing sheep,
Yeah,
they're
it's a
pretty
good
outstanding.
people.
So yeah, I'm not going to claim that credit, but I'm just glad that we've got good partners like you and others out on the task force that are involved.
Yeah. Well, so let's hop into the task force a little bit. How did that come about? Was that Micah Most and McKenna Julian reaching out and saying, "Hey, here's this need," or how did that come about?
Yeah, for fear of omitting anyone, I feel like
Or
it is our
sure,
good extension
extension.
educators. At the time, yeah, it would have been Micah Most, McKenna Julian, and then Dagan Montgomery. And
Mm-hmm.
um, just having those conversations saying, you guys are excellent educators out in the state and you have a lot of sheep in your regions that you're responsible for. How can we have a bigger impact for the sheep industry in the state of Wyoming and regionally? And um, it was, I think, as you look across extension organizations across the country, those that are admirable to me are those that have systems in place that aren't one person deep, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
team. And so when that one person either moves on in their career or is no longer present, I've oftentimes seen some programs just kind of diminish over time. And we're far too committed to our industry for that to happen. And so I think it was that twofold motivation. How do we reach more people, but also how do we build something that's going to endure at an institution that's been around a long time in a state that's known for sheep production?
That's great. And so pivoting just a little bit, so with the Sheep Task Force, sorry, you said it's twofold. Well, actually, that was going to be dumb the way I phrased that. Let me back up. With the Sheep Task Force, can you talk about a little bit everything that the task force originally sought out to do, but then how it's evolved today? Um,
Yeah.
just joining up everything. I know that we're responsible, not we, but the team is responsible for all of the Sheep Sense articles. Lindsay Stewart has worked really, really hard on the page on the UW Extension website, and works continuously on those graphics. And I can't think, I'm probably messing up the
Well,
terminology, but the
podcast, yeah, you
graphics
meant,
and the
yeah, the podcast or the webinar series we did.
The
the
webinar
Sheep
series, yes,
Sense,
thank you.
yeah, that you're referring to, the Sheep Sense kind of research briefs. And I
Yeah.
think the in-field training we did this year, we did that FAMANCHA internal
Yes.
parasite management training at
Hmm.
the Barnes family, and then also we're at Julian's where we spent a day understanding commercial sheep production in a range flock, and how internal parasites and other health issues affect
Yeah.
range sheep production. So I think what's really cool is it's a group of educators that we get together and we get our hands dirty, right? And
Hmm.
that's going to keep expanding as we spend more time out at ranches. So, for example, Dylan and I will head up to Johnson County to evaluate some rams and collect some data on some rams for two producers up there tomorrow.
Yeah.
Actually, we'll meet Micah up there, and similar
Oh, that's
activities
awesome.
we'll be doing with you in your area. Like we did the
Hmm.
webinar at Regan Smith's, right, where we looked at
Yeah.
his lambing facilities, and you were instrumental in that. So I think really, I guess I describe as it's taken on a life of its own, but we've got these products that were motivated by sheep producers to help add value for them, and every member of the task force has been involved in that. Um, so I think that's just really cool. What am I missing though? I know we've done a lot. Dylan, what else have we been involved in the task force? I'm trying to, Michaela, you
Well, and I
probably
know
know
there was
too.
the I know there was the booth set up at Sheep and Wool Festival,
Mm,
with
yes.
Wyoming wool growers, everything there. That was super neat. I know I wasn't there the entire time, but just what I did get to see on the tail end, that was really neat to see. And I know that people enjoyed that, getting to see the actual end products of everything that wool fleece is used for, getting to see the sheep being shorn, um, which I know that we didn't contribute the sheep to that, but just that process, everything there, um, that was really cool
Yeah,
process.
that is a collaboration that I'd be super remiss if we didn't talk about. I mean, the Sheep and Wool
Yeah.
Festival sprung out of, the wool grower summer meeting that over time in previous years maybe was needed a facelift and a refreshing. And I think the work that Dr. Crane's done and this collaboration with the task force
Hmm.
with our wool growers industry group is another huge product and synergistic collaboration. I guess the theme of collaborative uh, inputs from everybody is really what makes anything work in the sheep
Yeah.
industry, but especially in the educational side. That's a really good point about
Yeah.
that festival.
Dylan, what else did we miss?
I'm trying to think. You hit on everything big that I was going to say. Or, yeah, I can't really think of anything else at the moment.
No, that's fair. Okay, fair enough.
But we
So,
we do
oh,
have
go ahead.
coming up, Michaela. I don't know if you will be able to be there, but at the Wyoming Ram Sale in Douglas next week,
Yeah.
we'll have a booth there for the task force. So I don't
Hmm.
know. This probably will be coming out after that, but I think
Yeah,
that's a
this
great
will be just a
opportunity.
couple weeks.
Okay, so but we'll be there and we'll be visiting with producers, and again, that's one thing that's so great about extension is um assessing of needs and getting out there and visiting with producers and saying, what do you need more information on? We live in the digital age. How do you want that information? A lot of what I do is I receive texts and phone calls all day long from producers, and it seems to peak in the spring during lambing, and then it peaks again in the fall, ram test season. But um, one of the beauties of what we'll be doing at the ram sale, and McKenna, Julian, and Micah are going to be helping with that booth, um, is just interacting with producers and saying, what can we do? What are issues of concern in your operation that we can help
Hmm.
you solve? And that's what's so awesome about extension, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
I
that's
think the
really
thing that
cool.
I've been really excited about with the sheep task force is like doing these trainings with the ag educators throughout the state. One example of that being the FAMANCHA scoring, and then seeing that being implemented. I know Dan had recently emailed me about what supplies we got for that training and how best he could
Mm.
use that in his area. So seeing the stuff that we can do to help expand the capacity around the state, I think is truly
Right.
inspiring. So
That is really inspiring. Yeah, and then too, I think everybody being able to just take that back to their own individual counties. And then like you said, being a resource for Dan, everything like that, individual agents. Yeah, that's great. So circling back to what you mentioned being gone for 8 months, is that right?
Yeah.
And Dylan, you will also be gone for a little bit of that time. Do you want to tell everybody about this? The big drum roll?
Yeah. So in at the university system, um, once in a blue moon, you get the opportunity to take as what's called a sabbatical and do sabbatical research. And so um, last year, it's been a lengthy process applying, but I was granted approval to travel to New Zealand and study some of their farmer programming methods, how they deliver important, timely information to sheep producers in their country. And with close to, I think there's 16 to 18 million head of sheep there in New Zealand versus 5 million in our country. There's some things, some technologies, and some approaches that spending that time down there at Lincoln University and working with their extension service, Beef and Lamb New Zealand, is hopefully going to be an opportunity to bring some really good insights back to our industry here. Sometimes we only look at Australia and New Zealand as our competitors, right? Because we do compete in the marketplace for lamb and shelf space and lamb, but we sometimes overlook the collaborative opportunities we have to learn from what people are doing abroad, right, in the sheep industry,
Right.
and they've been leaders there. So, yeah, that'll be 8 months where Dylan and the task force. I'm not going to say Dylan. The task force is going to play a large role in meeting those demands, delivering programs, and then as part of that, we're hoping to bring a subset of the task force down and studying with me, looking at those extension methods for sheep producers down in New Zealand, so that again you can bring that home and expand it in your areas. What am I missing? I I want to hype it up more, but lots of grazing research and lots of sheep research in New Zealand.
No, I think it'll be really incredible. We actually just had a meeting about it yesterday, the Sheep Task Force subgroup, I guess, if you will. And we're I think you'll get a kick out of this. We're titling it Cowboys to Kiwis. So uh, but no, I
Uh,
agree. You mentioned typically we compete with the Aussies and the Kiwis. Well, and this was just an Olympic year too, so everybody's kind of feeling that competition, right? But especially when it comes to sheep and cattle, there is so much that they're doing that we don't do or that we can learn from. I won't say I in depth read yet. That's one of the things that I do have on my list to read is your paper that you did for this sabbatical. But I started reading it. I got through like halfway through maybe, and
and you fell asleep, is what you're saying. Yeah,
no, I
it's
didn't.
good
I
material
just
for sleeping. Yeah.
it's so in depth though, and I'm like, I need to do my research before we get into this, because just some of the points that you were pointing out and objectives, I just you don't necessarily think about it. And then I was doing my own research, and I didn't realize that their government contributes to the green factor that the sheep contribute to in their environment, and that doesn't happen over here. So it's just
Mhm.
these things that happen that don't happen here. So from a personal standpoint, I'm excited to learn. And again, back to the Sheep Task Force, if I wouldn't have joined the Sheep Task Force, this is literally something I wouldn't have learned about. So,
Yeah.
yeah, from that aspect, I'm excited about it.
Well, you
But
reminded me of one thing. I think the, a lot of the way that they teach down there, I love this, I won't call it simplistic, but the very practical way information is delivered. I think in the information
right,
age, especially at the university, we generate all this research, we overload the stakeholder or the producer with it, and then we say, hey, go figure out how it's going to work for you, right? in the hustle and bustle on sheep enterprises across the country, they just don't have time to do that. And that's our job in Extension, to deliver it in a way that says, here's the information that matters. Here's what's going to hopefully help you make better decisions and make you more money in a sustainable way. And I think that's what I'm looking forward to studying there. I often see people roll their eyes anytime we invoke the name of Australia, New Zealand, and they're like, oh my gosh, we aren't Australia, New Zealand. And I agree 100%, right? I think
Right.
climatic advantages they have even in New Zealand, the lack of predators for the most part is a
Right.
tremendous advantage they have. But that's kind of the superficial stuff that when we dig deeper and say, what productivity metrics have they been monitoring for a long time? And do they monitor quarterly to make sure that they're on track to be profitable, right? I mean, those kind of tools, when you have that many head of sheep and that size of an industry, there's just so much that you can learn from those things.
Yeah.
And so
And
yeah.
and let me, I guess, maybe ask just a novice question here, but you know, being someone outside of the sheep industry here or not familiar with it, when I think of sheep, I think of New Zealand, I think of Ireland, Scotland. Why New Zealand over maybe another country that was in Europe, in like Ireland, Scotland, the Netherlands, something like that?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So in 2019, before pandemic, the American Land Board invited us, a couple of us sheep specialists from the States, to be ambassadors as part of this ambassador program. And so that's where I first had some exposure to the contacts down there. And then I returned
Gotcha.
for a brief period last spring to kind of look at the opportunity of doing a more in-depth research time period and sabbatical there. And so I think it's the network there. But when you look at just globally export of lamb and wool, Australia and New Zealand are probably the most cutting edge. I think most people
Gotcha.
internationally, and I don't want to say this, I don't want to offend anyone, but they look to those countries to say what's the state of the art technology,
What
what is being
is?
implemented.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
so yeah, that was a major driver for that decision. And I think moving your family down there and allowing them to enroll in school and be a part of that culture, I think that's the side
Hmm.
benefit, right? That is a once in a
Sure.
lifetime opportunity. Um, so yeah, we're hopeful. I guess I should let the cat out of the bag a little. We're also organizing an extension trip for producers down there in July of 25. And so we're still trying to find funding and writing grants for that. But not only are we going to bring extension educators, but we also see the value in international exchange for our producers. And this is something that we're going to expand over the next couple of years. It takes
Hmm.
resources to do that, but much like as a young professional myself going down there for the first time, it helped me and inspired me to be a better sheep extension resource. And so we're going to do the same for producers. So this sounds really ambitious as I'm talking about this. I hope we do a good job and execute it at a high level, but um, it's coming.
No, I've got no doubt that it'll be exceptional. It'll be great. Dylan, what are you most looking forward to? And will you be there the entire time?
So I'll only be there when the extension professionals are going to be there. So
Okay.
um, yeah,
In
similar
July.
timeframes in May, I believe.
Extension, sorry. I heard
Yeah.
producers. Okay. I gotcha.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah, so I'll be there a little bit. I'm excited to look at some of the different production systems that they have down there,
Yeah.
more on pasture management and parasite management. Uh, I think looking into like cutting edge technology, definitely the southern hemisphere probably is the first to implement some of those, whether it be a pneumatic clamp system or any sort of sheep processing equipment. I'm excited to kind of have a little bit more exposure to that, and I kind of be like a sponge and absorb as much as I can.
Fair enough. Okay. So we kind of just touched on New Zealand and sheep. But jogging back to Wyoming and sheep, you said, wait, and don't let me misquote you, but you said that there are 5 million sheep in the United States. Was that
Yeah,
the right
roughly total.
estimate?
Yep.
So, what does that mean for Wyoming in terms of sheep numbers?
Yeah.
Approximately how many head of sheep are there in the state of Wyoming? Is that
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the USDA, which captures some of the statistics about inventories,
Mhm.
they do a really good job, and it's a tall task. But we estimate right now that we're around 340,000 head of sheep in the state of Wyoming. Um, Low 300s probably breeding ewes, but those
Sure.
numbers fluctuate a lot, and I think there's some
Yeah.
changes happening. But Wyoming is a major player. When you look at just total rankings, we're
Hmm.
third in total breeding sheep and fourth in total sheep numbers. But going back to that breeding sheep aspect, um, the sheep industry is really diverse, and in other states they have a mix of hair type breeds or dual purpose breeds or fine wool breeds. But Wyoming's unique because we still have a large nucleus of fine wool producing sheep. And USDA
Mm,
doesn't break that out, right? But that's something those of
I
us
gotcha.
sheep scientists look at as that's something that's pretty special. And because we have that kind of maternal Western white face, fine wool type of a sheep breed that does both lamb and wool, um, we also have a really great reputation for being first or second, depending on the year, in total value of wool produced, which is calculated by how much wool we produce times the average market price. So we've got a really dynamic and vibrant sheep industry in the state. The last thing I think that's really worth mentioning that's unique to Wyoming is we have the largest percentage of operations or sheep operations that are greater than 1,000 head of sheep. So we still
Okay.
have a strong community and culture of range sheep production here in Wyoming.
Hmm.
And I think that's noteworthy because um, there's a lot of changes. There's been a lot of changes over the past 150 years in the sheep industry, but
Yeah.
a lot of these range type sheep production systems paid for many of the ranches that exist currently that have been multi-generational. They began with sheep, and they may have transitioned to cattle. They may still have some sheep, but I think it speaks to the enduring nature of how sheep work on a really tough landscape, which is Wyoming, you know.
Yeah. And two, to just kind of keep this in perspective, like what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're just talking about Wyoming being third in the US with sheep numbers, are the other two states, and the only reason I'm asking this is because I think I looked it up for the sheep sense article I wrote, is it California and Texas?
Yeah, so we would be third in
And
breeding sheep numbers, but yeah, I think our leaders are, I think it goes uh, Texas, California, and then Colorado, I think, because of their large lamb feeding industry, and then we're
yeah.
fourth in total sheep numbers.
And so those are huge
Yeah.
states. You know, when you're just thinking about it that way, and for us to be so fourth in overall numbers, but then third in breeding sheep numbers, I guess to me that's huge because Wyoming, and I mean, you know, we're a state of 500,000 people, but when you're just looking at land wise, I mean, Wyoming is not a big state comparatively. So to
Mhm.
me, I'm just like, it's massive, you
Yeah,
know, just putting it up next to Texas and California. Good gravy, you know?
yeah.
That's pretty awesome, I guess. To me, I
Yeah,
don't
we're
know,
proud of it.
maybe just
No, it is
yeah.
awesome. And yeah, listen, we're excited about it, right? But I think
Yeah.
that's the thing that is so cool when you think about the dual products we produce, lamb wool and now
Yeah.
there's dairy sheep operations. There's also using sheep for solar grazing. Um, the opportunities for even more expansion, I think, are growing, and we have a really important niche in the sheep industry. When you look at all the lamb produced in the United States, about half of that is coming from the Intermountain West region of the US. So,
Right.
as an ag nerd, I love to classify regions that are famous for the products they produce. We are in what people are tired of me saying is the wine country of wool, right? We produce
Yeah.
some of the best sheep in the country in the Intermountain West and especially in Wyoming. And so that is something to be excited about in a scale and quality standpoint.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the solar panels for sheep grazing. Is this a new innovation that we're hearing about, that we're seeing um,
Yeah. I
in the
think,
field?
yeah, I think that it depends who you're talking to. I mean, it's been around for a decade or so, right? But it's really expanded. And I think the American Solar Sheep Grazing Association, they did a census recently, and I'm going to botch the stats, but they went something from like 10,000 acres under solar panel sheep grazing to over 100,000 in like a
Mm,
couple of years. And so, uh, regionally, I think there's larger parts of the country like the South, uh, the Southern Plains. Texas has a lot of those. It kind of started, I think, largely a lot in the Northeast, but it has grown like crazy, and it's created some real opportunities for sheep production systems that, man, it just exploded. I think in the past year, we've been working with 3 or 4 different solar developers to make sure that they're developing these larger sites that can be more compatible for sheep grazing, having water development, having handling facilities within these installations. And so I find myself struggling to keep up how rapidly this industry is growing. And I think, again, I
mm,
don't want to just talk at you, but I think the revenue picture that it provides and how it changes some of the optional revenue that is coming into these operations. If you think about it, some of these solar grazing companies are paying the sheep producer. The range could be as low as $100 an acre, upwards of $800 an acre, just to control the vegetation.
wow.
And then you think about the free forage resource for these operations, and especially in a region that struggles with forage resources consistently. We got drought cycles. Um, Having an opportunity to go to those sites that are fenced in, and you can control predators, both avian predators and
Right.
four-legged predators. It's just creating some real opportunities. So I'm anxious to see where it goes.
Absolutely. So Dylan, doing your graduate assistantship research and everything like that, have you heard lately of any additional, or I guess any new innovations in the field?
Yeah. So, part of my assistantship, my first year in my master's, was enrolling the university's flock of Rambouillet sheep into the NSIP. Is what it's commonly referred to, but it's the National Sheep Improvement Program. And while
Mm,
this isn't necessarily new technology, right? I think there's NSIP has had some form or shape since the 1980s, but how we can capture that data with EID technology to make that ease of
mm,
transfer into the system, I think has gotten exponentially easier in the last 15 years for sure. Um, instead of handwriting down, like looking at the ear tags, and, we're notorious for maybe the ear tags being really small, or maybe my eyes are just getting worse from reading research papers all day. But whether you're transcribing that wrong, EID technology definitely has made that a lot easier. Where sheep's in the weigh crate, captures a weight in about 10 seconds, or I mean less than that, like 2 or 3 seconds, and then it's out.
yeah.
So trying to understand all that research and how that could apply on some other operations has been some of my focus here, and just overall data collection. Um, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great companies that uh, there's a lot of great companies that offer the EID ear tags and different panel
Mhm.
readers and stuff like that. So whatever company you choose, I think there's a lot of benefit if you're dedicated to capturing more data.
I gotcha. Okay. So, speaking of your research, and you've done your oral defense and you're going to be going to New Zealand, everything like, is it okay to ask what are you looking to do in the future?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'd like to work in extension and be like a sheep extension specialist in some
Yeah.
uh fashion or something like that. So
Watch out, Whit. No.
yeah.
Listen, all of my students have already surpassed me. Yeah, I'm worried already. No, but I think Dylan won't toot his horn enough, but I think he has been instrumental in getting our flock enrolled here with the help of our awesome shepherd, Callie Kepke, but enrolling our university flock and being a reference flock to bring in other outside genetics and get them enrolled and linked in NSIP has been just one of the many things Dylan's done at a high level. But he alluded to this, and I just want to mention that, Michaela. I think sometimes there's an aversion to technology adoption, right? I mean, it
Sure.
takes some time and you have to have like Dylan mentioned, you have to be committed to it. But if someone is committed to making the technology work, there are some significant labor and time savings and uh, omissions of errors that sometimes creep into our record keeping systems. And so I think it's been fun for me to work with, I'm going to say, these younger generations. I'm in denial, but they're younger and they're tech savvy and they have the patience to implement these technologies. And they're also willing to say, hey, this technology doesn't really work well. And I'm not going to name many companies, right? But we have found certain uh, technologies and record keeping and EID systems that don't work as well as others. And so I think that's the really cool part for me is I get to train the next generation. They're also they're real partners in helping us figure out what works and what doesn't for the next 30 years of sheep production. So Dylan's done a
It's
great
really
job.
great. It sounds instrumental, yeah. Okay, fair enough. So extension sheep specialist, maybe a route. What other things though can be done in the sheep industry? So obviously, you can be a sheep producer, sheep farmer, sheep rancher, what have you. You can be an extension sheep specialist. You can be well, yeah, I'll just leave it there. What else can you do though in this field with either an education obtained or not, if that's not the route for you? But what else can you do in the field if you so choose? And that's to both of you.
Dylan, you take it first and then I'll follow up.
Yeah, throughout the last 6 years, I think um, people who have participated on the wool judging team or shown an interest in just the sheep industry at UW. We've been able to help place them at different sectors of the industry. So we've been fortunate enough to, have some people go into the wool side of things. Actually, too, because one of our former wool judges, like 2 years ago, actually just is now working at Center of the Nation Wool in addition to um, Dallin Brady, who's been there a few years. We've helped people go on internships on the lamb side of things. So I know, Superior Farms, we've had some students go there for internships, and Mountain State's Rosen when it was still uh, active and stuff like that. So there's certain sectors of the industry, like outside of just the lamb operations, that are out there. And I'm sure
Yeah.
Whit can expand on that a lot
Well,
more than I can.
you prompted it, Dylan. Allied industries, right? So I mean, there's a lot of infrastructure that supports the sheep industry, right? Like we got our pharmaceuticals, our feed companies, the processing companies, marketing and industry groups, ag educators. I think that's one thing that the world higher education has to be interdisciplinary and we're going to be forced to be even more interdisciplinary. And we in the sheep program have really tried hard to say, if you are an ag communications and marketing major, join our wool judging team, our wool evaluation class, get involved in advanced sheep production and expand your network, right?
Yeah.
I think too
Yep.
often, and I'm on a soapbox, you got me the mic. We work with young folks that are still figuring out what they want to do. We're all still figuring out what we want to do and helping them realize that the skills translate, the networking translates into future career opportunities. And I've had many students come back because I've been here at the University of Wyoming for 7 years and then 2 years at Montana State. Former students come back all the time and they talk about how specific aspects of the curriculum carried over. I had one
Mhm.
student who's now in the hospitality and tourism side of things. But she told me the set of reasons she had to give at contests have allowed her to act under pressure. She deals with customer service and reservation
Yeah.
challenges. Now that's a completely different industry, right? But those
Right.
skills that you refine in some of these classes really do translate. But I think, and Dylan, correct me if I'm wrong, we have a really tight network of alum that come through the sheep program that began long before I got here. But what other industries am I missing, Dylan, that people have been placed in? Did I cover them? I mean,
I think you covered everyone that I could think of, for sure.
well,
You
and
know,
let me
while I
say
was
this, you told me the other day, Dylan, I got one of our former students in sheep production. You made a comment. He said, "Oh my goodness, he just bought like 1,000 head of ewes." And so often this is the case, and this is what's so cool is I get a lot of students that have a livestock background, likely not in sheep sometimes, and to hear and run into these students afterwards and say, "Oh yeah, I'm doing solar grazing contracts and I'm running 1,000 head of ewes," and they'll say, "Oh man, I'm making way more money than I did with cows," right? I mean that's not all the time, right? But I hear that often enough, and that's what's really cool is you get to hear people that didn't understand the opportunities. They were able to apply the information that we talked about. We won't take credit for them being successful in the business, but we gave them some tools and now they're running with it. And that is like, that is the legacy. That is what gets you up each day to go to work and think about the difference that could be made in the sheep industry
Yeah.
when you hear those stories.
That's really great. Yep, no, I think that's interesting. I think people think, either cattle, sheep, crops, what have you, one lane, and that's all that you can do. And I appreciate you guys bringing that background because there's so much more that supports all of those different industries. And you guys touching on the marketing and sales and the technology, everything else that supports it and goes into it. Yeah, there's a lot that supports one whole industry. And sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't, but so much or so more. What were those words supposed to be? More often than not, they do. And it's funny because I actually used to work 8 years, give or take, in digital marketing, and now I'm in extension. So
And it's
crazy how
being
that
put to
flip
good
flops.
use, Michaela. You're killing it.
It's being put
You're
to good
adding up
use.
that area. You're such an asset there. So thank you.
Bridger saw something. No. Okay. So what's upcoming programs? So this podcast will come out on October 4th, that Friday. So are there any programs almost a month from now, actually? We've got chances and then this one right after that. So are there any upcoming programs, anything like that after that date that you guys want to plug in?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that
Dylan's face.
Dylan,
Sorry.
That's a
well,
whole month away. No.
I know.
So our eyes are on our Ram Sales seminar right now, and
Yeah.
as I mentioned, we're doing a lot of field visits right now. So we'll be doing several ranch visits before I take off to New Zealand. This time of the year, we do a lot of helping producers pick replacement ewe lambs, replacement rams, kind of some visual evaluation. We test the wool, we do some of that stuff. So that's kind of, we literally will get off of this and then we'll jump in the truck and that's where we're headed. But Ram Sales is going to be a great seminar. We're going to talk about some of the things Dylan alluded to, the National Sheep Improvement Program, other ways that we select, and why just selecting visually doesn't always tell us those more economic traits, what's going to be passed on to offspring. So we're going to spend a lot of time on that. That would be a week. Well, it'd be next week, Monday. So this would be retrospective, but in October, after this comes out, we will be receiving Lamb of Year lambs, and that enrollment form exists. We'll be receiving ram test rams. Dylan, you want to talk a little bit about those programs, what we did with research last year there and this year?
Yeah. So the Lamb a Year program, for those of you who don't know, is similar to what might be traditionally referred to as a steer a year program, where producers will donate animals. In this case, it'll be lambs and ewes or wethers to the university, where we will collect as much data as we can and give that back to the producers, from the average daily gain, in the feedlot and performance, to translating that inside the cooler, where we've had some great partnerships with some abattoirs down in Colorado to collect that data and send it back to the producers. So, I mean, oftentimes when lambs are sold in the fall, we might not have the greatest idea of how they do on the rail. So this gives people who are participate a snippet into overall lamb performance while supporting a great program here on campus. That's the Lamb a Year program. And the RAM test is a white-faced RAM test that we're moving into with the 65th year, in collaboration with the Wyoming wool growers. And RAM lambs come here usually around the first week of October, and they'll get shorn as they go on test, as we'll evaluate fleece traits. So everyone kind of starts off with a blank slate. We'll put them on a pretty good feed stuff throughout that trial period to evaluate some growth metrics. We'll look at overall fleece quality, from shoulder to britch, and taking core samples and sending them off to a lab to get that analyzed for not only fiber diameter, but variation throughout the entire fleece as well. We get to do some visual scores and bring in some of our students from the sheep production class in the spring and show them, like, some somewhat subjective scores on what a belly wool line is, and where, some rams might be reaching that upper threshold where it might not be adequate to necessarily breed back to your ewes, or, showing some really good examples. And more often than not, it's the latter. We're really blessed in the state to have so many good genetics out there, that we're able to show students in our sheep production class with that. So then our ram test field day, I believe, is going to be the first Saturday in April, at the Laramie Research and Extension Center outside of Laramie. So yeah, that's going to be another thing on the horizon. But before I forget, I do want to plug, because we're getting into the wool judging season. So on January 14th, here in Laramie, we'll be holding the 7220 wool judging contest. And this is a national contest where we have teams not only at the collegiate level, from Texas, Kansas, Montana, South Dakota come, but it's a great contest for 4-H and FFA kids to really see some premier wool. Whit referred to this area as being the wine country of wool production. We try to showcase some of our great wools there, for that contest.
So Dylan's gonna have his
That's really-
hands full. That's what he said.
It sounds like it. That's really neat, though.
And I
go
would
ahead.
plug some of the webinars. I mean, those are in the works right now with the task
Yeah.
force. I think those are coming together for the calendar year as you guys take the reins while I'm gone momentarily. So
So for those who are wanting more information, I would say that the best way to look at that would be following either the Wyoming Wool Initiative on Facebook or the University of Wyoming Extension Sheep Program Facebook page. Michaela, please correct me if I'm wrong, but there is also an email list, right? Somewhere. And I think if you're interested in that, you can probably email Michaela to be put on that list.
the Ram sale booth, you can sign up for
Yes.
that email list.
Yes.
Yes, and get timely updates. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Send me an email. We will include everybody's, well, mine and Dylan. Do you want your contact information included? Or no?
It's a good question. Sure.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
can, I was
Yeah,
gonna say, we can edit
absolutely.
this, cut it out.
But we would be in deep trouble if we didn't plug the website that we spent a lot of time
Yes.
building the University of Wyoming Extension Sheep
Yes.
Program website. It's been built. It's a collaborative effort through the Sheep
Mhm.
Task Force. Lots of good information there. The research that we published, the research that we're summarizing and translating, production calendars. So please visit that, use that as a resource. And there's lots of contact information of task force members answering questions while we're gone, while I'm gone, and Dylan as well. So there should be no absence of electronic media out there for us.
Absolutely. Perfect. Well, is there anything else that you guys would like to circle back on, touch on? Anything?
I'm looking at this list here. I guess just know that, even though I am on sabbatical and I don't even know, I think we've talked about this, the program that's been built has allowed lots of people to step up and step in. And also our Wyoming wool growers, our awesome industry group, has lots of resources there. Our executive director there can be a resource. But yeah, I think we built capacity for the state of Wyoming. We get calls from all over the country. We try to direct them back to their resources, but I think without sounding boastful, I think we built something special here, and it's everybody contributing to the sheep industry, from producer, extension educator to students on campus. So.
Absolutely. Okay, well, Dylan, Whit, thank you both so much for your time. I do appreciate it. And I appreciate you guys hopping on Zoom too. That was really great. So
Yeah,
thank
well,
y'all
thank
so
you.
much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. And you guys have a fun time in Johnson County and a fun rest of your day today.
Oh,
You too. You too. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you guys.
thanks.
This was episode 8. I'm your host, Michaela Getz, and as a reminder, we had Dr. Whit Stewart and his graduate assistant, Dylan Laverell. Thank y'all so much. As a reminder, this is a University of Wyoming Extension podcast. The university is committed to equal opportunity for all persons in all facets of the university's operations and is an equal opportunity / affirmative action employer. If you have any questions, comments, concerns about this statement, please don't hesitate to reach out to mgetz@uwyo.edu and we can get your questions answered. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns about the podcast as well, again, don't hesitate to reach out to that email address, mgetz@uwyo.edu. Again, this has been a University of Wyoming Extension Agriculture and Natural Resources podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in.